lot of us have talked about mentoring in the past. A lot of people are saying you should go out there and network. Networking is going to benefit your career. And you say, great. How? So when we talk about networking, I want you to engage in the conversation and ask questions and figure out how. How is it going to work for you? How many of you are in a mentor relationship? We have these opportunities staring us in the face. What are we doing with those opportunities? When it comes to networking, I can't keep a job. I averaged 18 months of position for 22 years, and I blame networking. I've had 4 jobs in 3 years, and I blame networking. I average a call over the last few years, probably once every quarter, for someone saying, hey, Tom, we've got this position, are you interested? I don't necessarily take them all, but I blame networking. I've never been happier personally or professionally in my last 22 years here at the company than I am right now. And a good piece of that is because of the people I got to know, the people I'm working with, working for, and networking. So I do, once again, blame networking. What I want you to walk away with from today is that when it comes to networking, are all your eggs in one basket. Your manager, your manager's manager, those are the people I network with. That's not networking, that's working. The other thing I want you to walk away with from today is that you are fully accountable for driving your own career. It's nice, all of the support you can get from your manager, the people you're working with, whatever they can give you is bonus. You are fully responsible and accountable for driving your own career, and that includes networking. When you start to network and you start to roll this thing down the hill, it builds a ton of momentum and it builds exponentially. Like money in a bank, it will grow for you. It will grow exponentially. A lot of us think in terms of a vertical hierarchy. I can't talk to that senior leader. I can't talk to that manager. I can't talk to somebody in a different business because, no, I'd be stepping on toes. Vertical business model. Start thinking in terms of horizontal business model, which means that if all of us together cooperate and work together and start helping each other out, all of us will succeed and therefore the business will succeed. Start thinking in terms of that horizontal business model. So I don't care if you're a vice president, a senior vice president, an executive senior vice president. I don't care what the title is. I started pushing that to the side. It used to be, literally used to be, the first thing I would look up when I was meeting someone. What's their title? Now the first thing I look up is, what do you do? And are you connecting to what my goal is for networking? And that's going to be an important theme as we go through this today, is what is your goal for networking? If it's to meet and say hi, you don't have a goal yet for that particular networking. And each particular connection and relationship you're building will have varying goals. And we'll talk about that. The last thing is, it's not as hard as you think. Networking is not as hard as people in their head are making it out to be. Place that first phone call. Send that first note. And just start doing it. It gets easier over time. And we'll explain that as well. Believe it or not, it gets easier over time. It's not as hard as you think. So why is networking important? We have this social networking fever going on. How many users are there on Facebook? As of January, 1 billion. How many users on LinkedIn? 135 million. It's visited 81 million unique times per month. Let me say that again. It is visited 81 million unique times per month. People are out there looking. This doesn't mean you should go off and join these. I'm telling you this is because it has become the norm. There are huge benefits in doing it. I'm going to talk about the cons that go along with those pros. And the cons are we have this willingness to do it because it's anonymous. A lot of times. We're willing to sit behind a keyboard and go, did you see? That's social networking. LinkedIn, a little bit more professional, still social networking. Yes, we know a lot of the people that are out there. It's not as anonymous, but it is still social networking. Professional networking is we have this opportunity staring us in the face if we are employed to say, let's deepen our relationship. Let's figure out who you are. Let me call someone I don't know who works in the same company who doesn't even know what I do. And let's do that. We have this societal willingness to stand behind it quietly and be this anonymous social networker. But it is difficult for the people we work with every single day to actually place that phone call or start to do that own networking ourselves. We had this person come in from Visa a couple years ago, and he gave a stat that's probably a little outdated, but it makes sense. We had, what do you think the average number of friends a person has who's in college on Facebook?
A couple hundred.
At the time, it was 438. It's probably much higher than that now. So we can have 500 friends, and I can't tell you that I have 500 friends that I'm truly friends with on Facebook. There are still times I'm like, gosh, I wish they'd have a picture so I can put that name to the face. That's not networking. But let's talk about the value of networking. I was reading an article from Harvard Business Review, and they started with a paragraph with the name of a person that I'd never heard about before. And his name was William Dawes. Anyone know who William Dawes is? He's a historical figure.
Oh, different person.
Well, he's supposed to be a historical figure, let's put it that way. William Dawes was a counterpart to Paul Revere, announcing the American Revolution. Huh. Paul Revere went north. William Dawes went south. Not figuratively, he literally went south. But we remember Paul Revere because of his networking. Does William Dawes have a poem about him? Do we remember William Dawes? No. Networking adds the value to build your legacy and to talk about who you really are. And so he was strong at networking to get the word out about him and the message without him having to actually do it. Interesting concept, isn't it? That's your network building exponentially. What is networking? So I've probably used the word networking 35 times in the last couple of minutes. What is networking? Anyway.
Building out your message exponentially.
Okay.
Building relationships with different people.
Good. Building your message, building relationships. Would it be easier to say what it is not? All-star. It is not kissing up. It is not job shopping. Huh. If job shopping happens because of what you've done with networking, it is an ancillary benefit. It should not be your primary benefit because you will most likely come across as ingenuine, desperate. Here I am, give me a job. That's not how it should be. But if you start to, and by the way, it's probably timed that well that you probably need that job or you're looking for that job as it's happening. Networking is a process that happens over time, and this process builds off of each other. You start to build these names of people you're in contact with who start talking to other people, so when the job comes up, have you ever applied for a job and they said thanks but no thanks very quickly, and all of a sudden they hired someone And the first thought that went through your head was, they probably already knew who they were. Well, guess what? Your negative thoughts were probably right. There's nothing wrong with that. But remember, there's probably a deeper relationship. There's this trust and respect that was built between those two people that allows them to make this easier decision. It's not all about buddy-buddy. It's all about professional networking being built together. And then letting that do the work for you. What networking is building bridges. Bridging gaps. Providing you information. You ever have a problem and you need to get it solved? Isn't it nice to have a string of contacts you can go one after another? I lost my system last Thursday. I had all my stuff for the last 5 years saved in this one place. From an old department I used to work in. I just never moved it. And someone said, oh yeah, you shouldn't have access to that anymore. I spent the next 8 hours not working, trying to figure out what I need to do. And about 5 of 5, I got really smart and said, Tom, all that networking you've done with your friends in technology and systems, and I called this person, and her first reaction is, Tom, why didn't you call me first? Fixed it. Immediately. I had to explain to my boss why I wasn't working for 8 hours. Networking. When you have a problem, you have a solution. And by the way, networking isn't me trying to introduce myself to you. It is a two-way street. It goes back and forth. You shouldn't be doing all the talking in a networking situation. You should be asking the questions and learning about them as well. Tell me about your background. Tell me about the things that make you who you are. You're building a relationship. You're not checking off a box when it comes to networking. So let's talk about the value of networking. Opportunity seldom labels itself. One of my favorite sayings. So I asked the question of my boss, and I looked at the reports, and they were never on time, and they were never right. And I went to my boss and said, why are the reports never on time, and why are they never right? And he said, go on a 3-month task force and go find out. 2 years later, I was still there. So there's a message in here. First, opportunity seldom labels itself, and there is networking opportunities in there. Because all of a sudden, I went from managing 6 or 7 managers and a couple hundred people to managing 4 people, overseeing reports that go out to 3,000 people, and they were never on time and they were never right. I had to talk to the people, the managers, HR, finance, the tech folks who are putting all this stuff together, the programmers. I had to speak their language. I had no choice but to network. So I was forced into a networking situation. Not everybody has done that, but my eyes opened just a little bit. Because networking is understanding the complexity of this environment you're in. And it's big. It's immense. But when we talk about what networking is, if you think it is going across a hall and talking to a manager you don't know, you are not networking. If you think that it's going down the hall to another business you've never been in, that's kind of networking. I was talking to a mentor I had once, and we were chatting, and I said, so what are you doing for networking outside of meeting with me? She said, nothing. I said, all right, let's pick 3 people right now who you can network with over the next couple months. The name she gave me. Her manager, her manager's manager, and someone who was 300 feet away from her. And that is not an exaggeration. So I said, can you at least talk to your manager's manager's manager? Can you at least talk to somebody who may not be familiar with you? Because you're just doing your job if you're meeting with those folks. We work for an immense company. And this immense company doesn't talk all the time. Left hand doesn't always talk to the right hand. Here's your opportunity to make them talk together. And if you have questions about, gee, I wonder what happens in this department, ask the question. Talk to somebody who's in that department and figure it out. And we'll talk about how to do this networking in just a little bit. Because it's not as hard as you think. And I don't do it as often as this probably comes across. So I'm managing this reporting group, and they say, hey, Tom, I understand you have some family in Rhode Island. Any interest in moving down there if there was an opportunity? I said, yeah, I'll think about it. 8 hours in an interview, talking to people over and over and over and over and over again. I would be overseeing 750 people, and there were 2 positions available. They narrowed it down, and they made a decision, and they called me a couple weeks later, and they said, Tom, guess what? You were number 3. So I said, can you give me the feedback? And they said, we don't have a whole lot for you. I said, do you mind, for my future development, if I could talk to the person who made the ultimate decision? And they said, sure, we'll connect you with that person. And I ended up having this conversation with them, and I said, so can you tell me what I can do to improve in my interviewing and what I need to do? They said, your interview was strong, your background is exceptional, and you can easily do this job. And we had no idea who you are. We don't know who you are. We don't know who your boss is. We don't know anything about you. Coincidentally, this happened about the time where we were taken over. So, another lesson in the value of networking is reach outside of your comfort zone beyond what you think your opportunities might be. So I'm reaching a little bit further, and I have this conversation with him, and I said, I appreciate the honesty. Do you mind if we continue to meet? I said, sure. 6 months later, he calls me up and says, one of them left, the job's yours, no interview needed. I'm still in Maine. And I said to him, because we established a relationship now, I appreciate the offer, but no thank you. I had heard just a couple days before that phone call, there was some chatter going on, and I overheard it that there was an attrition problem. People were leaving the company in droves. And they were thinking and tossing around the idea of this task force. So I went and networked with some people, and I said, these are the people I'd probably cross paths with if I took this leadership role. See what they think. See if I have a game plan. I put together that game plan. I handed it to someone and gave them a proposal and said, again, taking the opportunities in my hand and doing something with it. Using my network and saying, I think that there's an opportunity that we can fix this in. I was told I could lead the task force. Then I had no choice again but to network. I was a one-person task force with my goal to reduce 45% attrition. I had no choice but to talk to HR, talk to the people who potentially might be leaving, talk to the managers who are causing all the people to know kids. Talk to compensation, talk to a bunch of people to figure out what's really going on. Talk to other lines of business. What are you doing that's happening that's going well? And what are some things that you think might be driving? And sharing notes, best practices. That's networking. We reduced that attrition from 45% down into the mid-20s in less than a year. And I didn't do anything. It was a complete group effort, and it was networking that was able to do that for us. So you have the opportunity to drive your own career. You have the opportunity when there are no choices to network, but you do have a choice to find the ways to network when you need to. There is value to network because you get to know the job. You build contacts. You get to solve problems and put out fires and solutions when you have it. Your success grows when your name grows along with it because it's not just you touting your name anymore. It's someone else doing it for you. And all of a sudden, where I had been for years, isolated, introverted, independent in thinking, all of a sudden, because of this network, you get the reputation of building bridges, building partnerships, getting things done and executing in a team manner. I didn't change that much. My network was doing the talk for me. My actions with everyone else around me, we were doing it as a collective group together. The value of networking. Your network starts to build exponentially. But you have to start figuring out when to take action. So I have a boss. And that my boss sits me down about 4 years ago and says, "Hey, Tom, I want to share a story." My mentor just called me and said that her name had come up in a session where they were talking about opportunities, future jobs, and that her name came up, my boss's name, and her manager sat there like this. Didn't say a word. Are all your eggs in that basket? Are all your eggs only with your manager or your manager's manager? When people are sitting around a table talking about your future opportunities, are there other people in that room who know who you are, who can help facilitate that conversation? So she ended up ending the story by saying her mentor was in the room, and her mentor said, "Let me tell you all the great things about her. She does this well, this well, this. She's got some opportunities, but she'd be a great candidate for this next position." Is your manager having bad hair day? Are your eggs in that basket? So she says to me, I was sitting in a room, and your name, Tom, came up, and there were 15 people in the room. Here are their names. How many of them do you know? And I said, that's easy. I know 9 of them. She said, how many of them do you really know? 5, maybe 6. And then she said, of those 5 or 6, how many of them know you? Maybe 3. My next potential future move with the ones who are making the decision was 3 out of 15. I have to depend on those 3 talking about who I am and what I can accomplish. That's not enough. And so she said to me, Tom, you've got some work to do. And it was right there that I made a choice. And it sits on my calendar once a month, and it pops up, and it says, Tom, who are you going to network with then? And I made a decision that I was going to put myself so far out of my comfort zone, I'm going to meet with someone 2 levels above me. Why 2 levels? Why did I pick that random number of 2 levels above me?
One is too close, 3 might be too far away.
Yeah, 2 could be your next boss.
2 could be your next boss. There's a few things that are in there. 1, I want to put myself in a position to not move laterally, but to move up. If I'm talking to people that are 1 above me, I'm talking to people that have jobs I probably want. If I'm talking to people 1 level above me, that's my job. And those should be normal conversations, because remember what networking is: building your job knowledge, building those partnerships. I didn't say job shopping. Talking to the person a level above me is my job. And I had to force myself to break out of that comfort zone. Because remember, you, your manager, and your manager is a traditional hierarchy. That vertical business model. I had to force myself out of it. And start to think, well, hold on a second. We're in a horizontal business model. If I start to figure out that I can have a decent conversation with someone a couple levels above me, I'm going to stop thinking about what their title is and start having a real conversation. And it was hard at first. It wasn't as hard as I thought. And that's where I started, and I pulled this random number 2 for those particular reasons. You don't have to go 2. But you might want to start with pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. And then as things start to progress, then you can start to build what your network is all about. Because in my network conversations, I end every network situation with a question. And what is that question?
Who can I meet with next?
Who else can I meet with next? And when you start getting 1, 2, and 3 names, 3 meetings, all of a sudden you have 9 names. You're set for the rest of your year. Keep giving me names. And ask reasons, why would you give me that name? Is it something I said? I hope so. Maybe they said, I saw a passion in your voice about this topic, or you had that question and they're a subject matter expert on this. You might want to talk to them about it. So I start doing this rotational topic. The first person she told me to meet with was someone from HR or a leadership role. It why would she point me in HR's direction?
Because they know everybody.
They know everything. And all of a sudden, you're breaking yourself out of that little cocoon we're all in, this silo we all work in, and it forces a look at somebody who looks this way versus someone who looks this way. And so I met with someone from HR. I met with someone who's part of the leadership development group. People who make the next decisions on potential leadership positions. I went to the people who are making the decisions, who are facilitating those conversations. And so I met with these people, Ben and Ted. And they gave me some names, and they gave me a name of Bob, and I went to meet with Bob. And at the end of this, and I'm scared out of my mind, and I do this once a month for 30 minutes. I'm into month 3, and I'm shaking. And it's a phone call. And after 30 minutes, Bob says to me, "Thank you." I said, "Well, Bob, I was going to thank you." And he said, "No, thank you. You don't understand. Leaders love to talk about their business." And I went, "Huh, you do." And I started to figure out, I had built a relationship with him in less than 30 minutes. And he loved talking about his business. And I sat there and listened and was fascinated by it. So the next one I went out and spoke to somebody I had worked with for 3 years. Now, why would I go and network with someone I already knew? To refresh their memory of who I am. I like to say reinvent myself. There are some pieces in my career where I failed miserably. Yesterday, today. But you have to go in and reinvent yourself, because people only have a snapshot of who you are at that very moment, the last time they saw you, the last time they talked to you, or the last time they talked to somebody who talked about you. It's a snapshot. Change that snapshot. And I went back and I reinvented myself, even with people I knew very well. The conversations, what's interesting is, even if we potentially, and I picked people I wasn't necessarily always comfortable with, but I felt that I needed to work on that relationship. And I worked with people that had their own perception, my own perception of what their perception was of me. And I had to change that, at least in my mind, and I'm hoping in theirs. But what's interesting is, because I already had that connection, I get past the beginning of it, because it's a relationship. And I'm like, "Tom, how you doing?" And it's a real legitimate question. What have you been doing over the last couple of years? And let me tell you. Tell me what you've been doing over the last couple of years. And all of a sudden, you build a stronger relationship than you ever had. Now, I tell you this because you have to reinvent yourself, because those are people that can help you to move your career along. I don't want you to fall into the trap, however, of only picking people you've worked with in the past. I'm saying you have to balance it and mix it up. You have to make sure that people are changing their perception of you, that you're changing your perception in your own mind that's out there. But what's interesting is, my boss 6 months later said, "Tom, how's your networking going?" I said, "It's great." She said, "When's the last time you talked to Ted and Ben?" And I said, "Well, I talked to Bob because I'm going to start working for him very soon. And I haven't talked to Ben or Ted since." My networking was a checklist. Check off the box that you met with these people and say that you networked, and guess what? You didn't. I was checking off the box. So I end up calling these guys back, and now I think I'm petrified again. And I said, "Hey, Ted, how's everything going?" And he starts telling me things that we talked about 6 months ago. He remembered who I was. We had this little thing going. He wanted to take Spanish, so I kept pushing him to say, "You take that Spanish class," yes, and he was pushing me to say, "Go get your MBA." We remembered the conversation. He ends by saying, "Tom, you made my day." Huh. A couple years later, I'm still speaking to him. So I called the other guy. And the other guy starts laughing in the middle of the conversation. I said, "What are you laughing about?" He said, things seem to be going very well for you. I said, yeah, I'm going to be starting my new job. I love my old job. I'm going to love my new one. I love everything Bob has to say. This is going fantastic. And he just said, I'm the one who gave him your name. Networking pays dividends. And it wasn't probably just that simple conversation between two people. It was probably a simple conversation with this person, this person, this person, this person. And all of a sudden, you are the circle that's now surrounded by HR and other lines of business that you're familiar with, lines of businesses you're not familiar with, people you mentor with, your manager, your manager's manager. And all of a sudden, this little web right here starts getting connected. And these people start talking about you. And your collective perception changes. Because now it's not just one person. Now I had somebody call and tell me what happened after one of those sessions where there were opportunities being discussed. And there was a manager I was working with at the time, and she just didn't like my style, didn't like what I was doing, and said, "This, you shouldn't hire Tom. Tom doesn't do this." And I got defended by 9 other people that were sitting there that have worked with me in the past. If all my eggs were in that basket, it wouldn't have happened. And I could be nowhere where I am today if my eggs were in that basket. I'm going to qualify what I've talked about when it comes to networking. None of this is possible unless you're performing at your current job. It is extremely important that those two go hand in hand. I didn't want to make that assumption. I want to put it out there. Making a bunch of phone calls and emails and having conversations and doing all of that is great, but if somebody comes up and starts talking and saying you're failing at your job, that networking goes both ways. It is not just all about the great things Tom does or you do. It's all about you as a whole. And your performance is a piece of that. It's just making sure that people are all telling a very similar story. You have to keep that into consideration. So you want to make sure you're going back and keeping in touch with the people that are out there. So how do you get started? How do you start networking? Pick up the phone and call someone? Hey, how you doing? I'm calling a network. Yes. Huh. Who's laughing now? It may not be as simple as that phone call to somebody, but it does mean set up an appointment. Within that appointment, you should have, I am here to network with you. It shouldn't be, I want to hide, I want to learn something about your business. Tell the truth. Figure out what your goal is first. What is your goal? So what are some goals that you can have for networking?
You want to learn about their business?
Learn about their business. Increase your business acumen.
Increase your exposure to people in the business you're interested in.
Sure. So long-term potential movement for you in getting to know that group. Good. So your goal when you start that conversation might be, I'm interested in this somewhere down the path in my career. Now you've just set the tone of the rest of the meeting. So do you send an email saying, hey, I'm interested in networking with you. Can you tell me what your open times are?
Send a calendar appointment.
Send a calendar appointment. I like to get rid of that middle person. When I send you an email, my options are I can do nothing with it, I can delete it, I can send it on, I can sit there and stare at it for days at a time. They may or may not respond. With a calendar appointment, especially internally, if you're doing external networking, it might be a little bit different. But internally, in your own company, you have the opportunity to set up a calendar appointment. You get to see when they're open. Now what's your excuse? And I put right there that this is a networking opportunity. And my choices are one of three. I can accept it, I can decline it, or I can move it, but it's still a positive. I've been doing this now for 4 years. I've had 2 people, I've never had anybody downright decline. I've had 2 people who constantly moved it time and time and time again where I finally got the message that they just weren't interested. Do I want to speak to them anyway? People, for the most part, like to talk about their businesses. If they've accepted my appointment, I'm in. Because now, it's just a matter of having these conversations. And what's interesting is, I didn't realize how much of this was going on behind the scenes anyway. I was a business support manager, so I became privy to people's calendars. And I was seeing these little appointments all over their calendar. Every time I wasn't doing it, someone else was. And this isn't a competition in who can network the most. This is just to say it is a normal process. Why not do it yourself? Yes?
2 questions. One, if a senior leader has like their own personal assistant, would you go through them first in that particular instance?
I have not. I have at times where they said, hey, listen, we've got to keep moving this. And then I'll call and say, hey, are they still interested in meeting with me? And they'll say yes, and then we'll just, okay, what's your time? And if it gets hit or touched a couple times is when I'll do that. When I set up the initial appointment and they have that, I'll have my write-up that's in there, and it starts by saying, hi, my name is Tom Dowd. This is what I'm currently doing. I've been with the company this long. I've been networking, and now I can say I've been networking for 4 years. I call it my rotational mentor program. I really do. And I say I just meet with a senior leader once a month for 30 minutes, and then I put what my goal is, to increase my business acumen, to understand what your business does. I currently started a new role, and I understand our lines of business might connect a couple times. I've used that quite a few times because I've had quite a few new jobs. And so it's been very helpful. Or I'm interested in joining this field at some point in the near future, and you start going down that path. The key is to be open and honest. And so when dealing with the assistant, a lot of times they'll click accept. And then I just kind of chuckle because I know that that person didn't read it until the day of the meeting, and I'm okay with that too because that gives me an introduction. So with all of this, do you have your elevator speech ready? And if you don't, get one. You don't want to spend 20 minutes of that 30 minutes talking about who you are and what you've done and how you collected on these 17 different people. And be clear, be concise, and match your elevator speech to the goal. I literally have a piece of paper that says elevator speech on it. I've memorized it, but I adapt it to based off of the need. And it is my elevator speech. Because it keeps me on track as well. Here are the points I want to make. Here are the points I want to make sure because I've got some personal things I want to make sure that get shared here. Because they may only know me from this department. They may only know me from this company. They may only know me from here. But if I can blend that together, so my elevator speech, I make sure includes Toastmasters, National Speakers Association, married with 3 kids, lived in Maine for 18 years. Those are the things that round me out, who I am, which years ago I probably wouldn't have included in a networking situation. But this is building a relationship. This isn't an interview. I wanted to build that relationship, and by finding those connections where someone said, I've been to Maine sometime, and I said, oh, where have you been? And all of a sudden we're having a conversation. But what's interesting is you also have to prepare. I said a half hour. It's 45 minutes a month, gang. The half-hour meeting and 15 minutes to write the questions up you want. So when you set up the appointment to network, you should be setting up 2 appointments. The one for the actual networking, and a couple days before prepare the questions you want so you can meet your goals. Remember, it's only 30 minutes. Anything more than 5 questions, and I never get to question 4 or 5. Because I'm all engaged in the conversation. And by being engaged in the conversation, I'm listening to them, and then I'm responding with a question based off of the response that they gave. But it's good to have there so there's not this dead air in this awkward silence. So if you're prepared, and it just shouldn't be 5 questions you just throw out there randomly, but things that are thought-provoking to you, things that are thought-provoking to the person, And what's your favorite meal? Shouldn't be on there. What's your favorite vacation location? But I have asked questions, what has been your biggest roadblock this year? Maybe we're coming into 2013, what is the thing you have to solve going into next year? What was your biggest challenge this year? What do you want to do next? I was talking to someone who was in a leadership role, and they said, I've been talking to people, part of my responsibility is talking to the people who report to the CEO. I said, you get to develop them? And they said, yeah, and all of a sudden, my questions went out the window, and we started having a real live conversation. And I learned in that conversation, furthermore, to stop worrying about titles, because there are people out there who need development as well. And I said, huh, isn't that interesting? I got something completely out of the networking situation that I wouldn't have expected.
And a comment for you, I haven't joined LinkedIn yet, I'm going to, but I think that's a great place to learn about what a person does. Because it has people's resumes, right? And what they've done.
If you are going to do it, when it comes to LinkedIn, it is all in. Don't go to LinkedIn and put, I worked at this position for these 3 years, and that is your description under LinkedIn. You have to treat it like a resume. Because by the way, as soon as you start doing LinkedIn, people start looking. And once you're on there, they're going to start looking and figure out what you were doing. And if you're in there and there's typos, you go in there and it's half-baked. You only put half the effort into it. I'm starting to get a picture of who you are, of not going all in. Have it detail-oriented. And somebody once said to me, well, are you job shopping with this? It looks an awful lot like your resume. I said, nope. But now they know all the details that are out there. And yes, I have gotten requests from people saying, hey, are you interested in doing this? I've gotten speaking engagements from people who have said, hey, I see this as your background. And so it works. And even if it's just sitting in the background, it is support of who you are. So if people are like, yeah, I'm not sure they really accomplish all that stuff, they can go out and take a look at it, and it's there. It's public domain. So let it work for you. It's a free way of letting your network do the work for you. My recommendation is, as soon as you do it, go all in. I probably don't look at my LinkedIn. Now, I mean, the people I'm working and connecting with, sure, I do that a couple times a week. I have it set up as a routine. Go in and set up who you want to connect with, and then accept or make decisions on people who want to connect with me. But I only go in and make updates to it once a quarter. It's the same time I do on my resume. Pops up, says, update your profiles on your resume, update your LinkedIn. And I'm like, okay. And spend 5 minutes to go to my LinkedIn and make any adjustments that are on it. But you have to go all in. But it is a key way of staying and doing the network that you are. I came in here, and there were people that were visiting the site. And they said, Tom, I'm keeping up with you on LinkedIn. I went and checked you out. And so now they know what my outside interests are. And that can help with volunteerism. It can help with other opportunities that you might be interested in, as long as they're not a conflict of interest of what we're doing. Take advantage of the opportunities that you have in front of you. So you're having these conversations. You're setting up these appointments. It's taking 45 minutes a month. I save that introduction I have as my template when it pops up in my monthly routine, and I edit, copy, paste, and then I adjust. It takes me 45 seconds a month to set up my next appointment. I already have my list. I already have prioritized who's in it. I already know what my goal is for that, and there it goes, and off we go. So I'm not wasting time. Your conversations you will have with those leaders will get more comfortable over time. You'll start to realize where to adapt, where to not force all 5 questions onto someone. You'll learn about your listening skills. You'll figure out how to engage. You'll start to get a little bit of confidence in how you present yourself to senior leaders. And it comes back to some of the stuff we talked about on communication effectiveness. This is your time to experiment. Your time to play around. Your time to gain that confidence you want. You want to go out and do this networking is your chance. In my 4 years of doing this, I've had 2 people that I finally felt were kind of blown off by doing it and just didn't want it. So I didn't meet with them, which is fine, because it probably wouldn't have been a productive conversation. I only remember one occasion, where after the 30 minutes, the person still had questions as to why I was calling. They felt there was this underlying theme. that I was trying to get something from them. Gave me some thought to say, how could I have handled myself a little bit differently there? Did I come across potentially too strong? Did I give them the impression I was job shopping? And so it was good feedback for myself and when it comes to self-awareness. And then I chalked it up to, okay, I got my learning out of it. He knows who I am. But what's interesting is, remember, that's only my perception. He was up here a few months ago and he said hi. And I introduced myself and he said, oh, I recognize your name. Networking at work. May not have been doing a lot of things in the background like some of the other networking has been done, but there was a connection somewhere, even if it's this big, that's a connection. So I had been down to North Carolina and I started this leadership program. And they said, Tom, there are two things I want you to walk away with from this. One, we're going to increase your business acumen by being part of this group. And two, we want to make sure that you're networking. And I said, that's great. Next morning, I'm sitting at the hotel and I went and I worked out. And I was on the treadmill and there I was. And I look over to my right and there's this guy who looks an awful lot like our CEO. So I went back to the group that day and I said, I saw somebody who looked an awful lot like our CEO, and they said, yeah, he periodically works out there in the hotel. And I said, oh, it was our CEO. I said, yeah. Huh. Next morning, I'm on the treadmill, and comes and joins me, he's on his treadmill. And I go home later, or go back to the hotel room later that day, and I call my wife, and I said, you'll never believe it, I was running next to our CEO. And she said, did you say hi and introduce yourself? I said, no. My wife is slightly sarcastic, and she said, coward. I said, but I don't like to be disturbed when I'm working out. I had a headset on. He had... Coward. I said, fine. And he wouldn't be here the third day in a row. If he's here the next day, and the opportunity presents itself, I'll introduce myself. Next morning I go down there, I'm on the treadmill and it's empty. 10 minutes later he comes walking in and he's running right next to me. That's like, so I'm finished my work and I'm sitting out on this bench and I take my headset off and a couple minutes later he comes walking right in front of me and he stops and takes off his headset. And I'm sitting there saying, opportunity, seldom. And I introduced myself. And I said, hi. It wasn't as bad as I thought. No, I don't think that networking is going to continue to pay dividends for me down the line. But it gave me a little bit of confidence and a little bit of courage. And said it wasn't as bad as I probably thought my head was telling me it was going to be. So I went back to the group and I said, remember you told us that this program was to increase our business acumen. I said, you also told us it was a great networking opportunity. They said, yeah. I said, I went straight to the top. So what questions or comments do you have about networking?
Did you give him your elevator speech?
I did, because he had just been on 60 Minutes that Sunday before. And so I talked about the 60 Minutes piece, but you bring up an interesting question because he has since moved on and we got a new CEO. And a person I was working with 6 months ago literally got on an elevator who was working out. Now, I'd been working out with this guy. Every morning we saw each other in the hotel gym. And we worked together and we would just chat on the treadmill. And I left that Friday morning and he sends me an email that Friday saying, hey, Tom, guess what? You'll never guess who was sitting next to me as I was working out Friday morning. And he said, the CEO. And he said, we both walked into the elevator at the same time. And I've been telling him about his elevator speech, that he needs to get one because he had a little opportunity when it came to confidence. And he said, Tom will never guess, I used my elevator speech literally on an elevator. So, yeah, it was good though. I mean, he had 2 floors to go down. And he said, this is who I am, I work for these people, this is what I do. And he said, that sounds great, you know, this is nice to meet you. You never know when those opportunities are going to